So time to dust off my Switch 2. It has been months since I have played my Nintendo Switch 2. I pretty much only played it at launch, but now that there is a new Pokemon game, which does not come out all the time, although a little bit more often than I would like, it is time for me to actually jump back into the Nintendo ecosystem and see if the Switch 2 is actually worth it after all this time. If you're new here, my name is Arnell, the comic book gamer, and on this channel we talk all about gaming tech and accessories, so if that is something that you're interested in, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another video like this. Also, if you want to check out any of my recommended Switch 2 accessories, JSOX actually sent me out a lot of really awesome accessories. Totally not sponsored, by the way, this particular video, but I do just want to give them a shout out because they have pretty much every accessory that you might be interested in. So I will have those linked down below if you want to check those out. You might see some of those accessories sprinkled throughout the video, so I just wanted to make sure that you knew that they were all linked down below. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't think that I would come back to the Switch 2, at least not for a while. When the Switch 2 came out, I was very excited for it, but the excitement died down within a couple of weeks of launch because pretty much the only new thing that we had at launch for the most part was Super Mario Kart World Tour. I honestly can't even remember. I always get the name confused. But anyways, it's not that it's a bad game by any means. It is my first Mario Kart game, to be completely honest, and I absolutely love it. My family absolutely loves it, but you can only play so much Mario Kart for like 30 days straight until you kind of just get bored of it and you want to move on. I wasn't really interested in trying out the Cyberpunk 2077 on the Switch 2. I wasn't really interested in trying out some of these newer games that were now available for the Switch 2 because I already owned them and I didn't want to spend my money playing it again on the Switch 2. Now, the only other game that to my knowledge, is brand new for the Switch 2, other than Legend ZA and Super Mario Kart. I think I've been calling it Super Mario Kart this whole time. I don't think that it's Super at all. I don't think that's in the name. But anyways, the only other game is Donkey Kong Bonanza. And correct me if I'm wrong down below. That is a fantastic game. It's a lot of fun. It really showcases what the Switch 2 can do as far as just from a pure performance standpoint. It does look great for a Donkey Kong game, and just in general, just the destruction capabilities that you have are just really awesome to see on a Nintendo product. So big kudos to Nintendo for that. But while there's really awesome games to be had, and I'll touch on the pros here in a second, there was something, especially in handheld mode, a couple of things that just kind of really irk me with the Switch 2. I'll get to those in a little bit, but let's just start with the positives. So what's really working for the Switch 2 is the much larger size. So especially if you are using it in handheld mode, you are going to love and appreciate the larger size. It's physically larger. It's a little bit more shaped for the human hand in terms of the size of it. When you compare it to a Switch 1, it almost makes the Switch 1 look like a toy in comparison. It's just so much larger and just aesthetically more pleasing. You have a really nice, just sort of black, almost monochromatic look to it, but then you have some pops of colors with the aqua and the coral. So that's something that I really appreciate, is that it just is kind of like an understated device, and it just kind of looks a little bit more premium than what it actually is. And it feels good in the hands as far as the clickability of the buttons. The overall size of it is nice. I'll touch on the shape here in a little bit, but just focusing on what's actually working for it is the overall size of it is much more immersive, especially when you are playing in handheld mode, like I said. I mean, you're going to have a nice, larger, bright screen that's very vibrant and colorful, that really allows the colors to pop, especially with HDR. Not to mention the backwards compatibility, which really is to be expected with a newer console, but it is nice that with all of these sort of money-hungry decisions that Nintendo has made, at least recently with the Switch 2, it is nice that we do have some native backwards compatibility with almost every game in the original Switch library. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't spend like the $30 or $60 or whatever it was for a really cheap feeling and looking 720p camera, so that's just not really something that I'm really interested in as far as like the game chat mode, but that is there for people that are really interested in that. And the display, like I said, is just so vibrant. It really helps to make older games that, even if you didn't pick up the Switch 2 edition of the games, it really helps to sort of elevate the immersion of it. The graphics just feel just nicer. I mean, even just the original Switch versions playing on a Switch 2 do look nice. Now, I don't know if there's like a performance aspect that's actually upgraded just playing a native Switch game. But of course, if you pay for the Switch 2 Edition upgrade, then of course you're going to get all the other graphical improvements and performance improvements, and in some case, content improvements as well that help to justify some of the extra price points. But it is nice to see that just the original Switch library, just it looks and feels good and sort of at home on the Switch 2. Now, real quick, if you are finding value in this video and you want my thoughts on any other gaming handhelds, from the Steam Deck to the G Cloud to the ROG Xbox Ally, yes, that is a video that is coming soon. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. Well, make sure that you check out some of the other videos that I'll have linked down below, or actually at a playlist at the end of this video, so that way you can just click and jump right into that as well. All right, now let's talk about the not so great stuff. So the handheld itself, the Switch 2, handheld console hybrid, whatever you want to call it, it is objectively a good gaming device, at least in my opinion. Now, would it be great if it had some awesome features, like some, better performance out of it, or maybe the price wasn't what it was, or the games weren't where they were? Nobody's saying that the Switch 2 is perfect, or at least I'm not saying that the Switch 2 is perfect. There's definitely things that it could improve on. There's things that I would like to see that were better. There's even, some weird things like remote play. I'd love to see some sort of Nintendo version of remote play that allows you to be able to, sort of play your Switch 2 away from home somehow with an app on your phone. I don't know. Xbox, PlayStation can do it, PC can do it, Steam can do it, so just, yeah. Anyways, it is nice that there's certain things that you can do with the Switch 2, though, that you can't sort of natively do, or just do as well with other consoles as well. Going from tablet mode and using the mouse mode is great. There are things with, obviously, handheld is just a good experience as well, for the most part. Touch on that in a second. But then you also have the console mode as well, and how the dock actually improves the performance as well. And so some other PC handhelds or just other gaming devices try to do some of the things that the Switch 2 can do and the original Switch can do as well, but they don't do it either as well, or maybe it's so much more of a price jump to get up to some of these features that you're really getting a lot of value packed into the Switch 2 price. So I say all of that before I just start dumping on the Switch 2, just to, signify the fact that this isn't a perfect device, but at the same time, I do want to call out the things that the Switch 2 does well, and also call out the things that at least I don't appreciate with the Switch 2. All right, now all that said, the Switch 2 handheld mode, my biggest complaint and grief with the Switch 2 is still just the shape and sort of the design of it. I can understand why it's a sort of flat design to it. I can understand that it needs to be able to easily fit into the dock. I can understand why they made some of the design decisions that they did with the Joy-Cons sort of being flat, because especially if you're playing, with the right Joy-Con as one controller itself and then the left Joy-Con as another, well then ergonomically you're going to want to have it be a little bit flatter, just that way you kind of have a more normal experience with it. It would be a little bit weird if it was ergonomically shaped for it to feel super awesome in your hands, but then when you're going to hold it sideways for like a Mario Kart game with your friends or whatever, then it's just going to kind of feel awkward and it's going to almost feel like you're holding it a way that it's not designed and intended to be used. And so I can understand why they did a flat design. That said, I don't like the flat design. I feel like we're either going to make it uncomfortable for someone using it in regular handheld mode, or make it potentially uncomfortable for somebody that has an ergonomic designed Joy-Con, but then they're using it sideways for like Mario Kart or just different things like that. So I feel like either way, you're going to kind of disappoint one crowd. And I feel like the crowd that would be okay with some disappointment is the crowd that is using it sideways as its own native controller. I feel like that crowd is just okay with understanding that this sort of smaller thing, it's super small to begin with, just using that as its own controller, even though it is bigger than the previous generation. It's not like it's a small design to it, and so it's not going to be like sort of the ideal way to play a Switch 2, especially for long periods of time. So I feel like if you're going to sort of inconvenience someone with a design choice, it would be better to inconvenience the smaller portion of people that are not going to hold that much weight against the Switch 2. More people, I would imagine, use it handheld for long periods of time, and so I would just think making it more ergonomic and more comfortable, that would be the better crowd to go with. And I feel like maybe that's not what Nintendo was thinking at all when they just chose to make this design. Maybe they just did that because it was just cheaper and they just didn't want to, add in the extra materials to add some curvature or change up their manufacturing process or whatever's the case. Maybe it's just as simple as that. In my head, I almost feel like there was just this weird design decision that they needed to make of who to inconvenience the most. And so in my mind, that's just my way of just sort of justifying why they chose to make it as flat as they did. But that said, it's just not a good time to hold it for a long period of time. And that's just sort of my gripe, because it is a much larger device. The buttons feel great. I love seeing the screen right in my face. I didn't use the original Switch in handheld mode because it was a flat design, but it was also so much smaller that it just really felt like a toy in my hands. And there's some of you out there, I can already see the comment being written right now, that are just fine with the Switch 2 and how it is shaped, and they use it almost exclusively handheld. They have no issues with it at all. They could play for 3 days straight on the Switch 2 with the design how it is, and if it works for you, more power to you. But just for me, I kind of like something with a little bit more shape to it, ergonomics to it, that my hand just kind of naturally cups around. So that's just a me thing. Now, another thing that I would love to see is just more games for the Switch 2. I don't think that we're quite there yet. I feel like it's time for the Switch 2 to be out, but the games just are not there to support a reason to justify getting a Switch 2. I feel like the original Nintendo Switch came out at a great time. It came maybe not right at launch with a lot of really great games, but shortly after, within its first couple of months, at this point, about 4 or 5 months after launch, you had really awesome titles that were on the original Switch. You had a very clear reason to want to jump up from the Wii U, which quite frankly, just nobody was buying or using or enjoying. And you had a very clear reason to go from that over to the original Nintendo Switch. Now with the Nintendo Switch over to the Switch 2, there's just not that much of a reason 4, almost 5 months later after launch. In my opinion, it's almost like a weird flex to say that you have a Switch 2, but probably most of the time, the games that you're playing on it are still games that are either available on the original Nintendo Switch or just your actual Nintendo Switch carts that are just in there. I wasn't a hater of the fact that Mario Kart World was the only game that was a sort of new launch game with the Switch 2, because I understand it. Developing games is expensive. It's a whole process. It's much bigger than just what we see on YouTube with just a trailer and a Nintendo Switch Direct, okay? So there's a lot of things that go into it, so I wasn't just a blind hater of that, just going along with the crowd there. However, 4 months later, the fact that I can't even name more than 3 Nintendo Switch 2 exclusives, or at least games that I'm personally interested in, and I'm somebody that has a wide range of interests. So the fact that I can really only name 3 games, Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and Pokemon Legends ZA, that at least Legends ZA you can also get a Nintendo Switch version of. So it's just, I don't know, it's just a weird time to just not have the games that you would like to see and just have more reasons to justify wanting to upgrade to a Switch 2. I mean, I'll take case in point. There are so many people that I know that absolutely love this Nintendo Switch. They love the versatility of it. They have like 2 or 3 for, people in their household. They love the games. They're huge Nintendo fans, but they don't have any interest in actually picking up a Switch 2. And like I said, I know many people that fall into that category. They're huge Nintendo fans, but they just don't see a reason to jump up to a Switch 2. And so the Switch 2 right now, to me, strikes me as somebody that is either getting the newest console just because it's the newest console to get, or is just somebody that's like super diehard into Nintendo and they just want the absolute best performance that they can get for a Nintendo product, and they, want to be able to play any exclusive games on the exclusive native hardware. And so it's just kind of a weird position to be as a Nintendo fan, because Nintendo fans, at least a lot of the ones that I personally know, and this is all anecdotal, aren't like running to the store to get the Switch 2. They're actually just waiting, and they're perfectly fine and content waiting. People that are just huge Nintendo fans. So anyways, take that with a grain of salt. It's my own personal lived experience, but hey, maybe you share some friends that kind of share a similar mentality as some of my friends. But even with all of those flaws, the Switch 2 is still a great product. It's still a great handheld. It still delivers what I would want a Switch 2 from a hardware perspective to deliver. It delivered enough of a graphical leap, enough of, innovative ideas with like the mouse mode and things like that, that just really justify a second generation for the Nintendo Switch. Would I have loved to see more? Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. But there's great design decisions and great things that have been done with the Switch 2 that I'm personally excited about from a hardware perspective, but just from a games perspective, I'm really let down. And the comfort, like I said, is just lacking. But that's just my own personal experience. Again, you might be one of the few people, or many people, I don't know how many people there are, that are really excited about the Switch 2's just size and just comfort and feel and hand and all that kind of stuff. So that's just not me. Now, like I said, I do have affiliate links down below to all the accessories that I personally use for the Switch 2. So if you want to check those out, check them out down below. And if you want my thoughts on either the Steam Deck or the Logitech G Cloud, definitely check out either of these videos on screen. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.